This is the all-new 2026 Nissan Rogue PHEV. I kind of spoiled the start there. It is actually a Mitsubishi. You see, Nissan needed to have their own plug-in hybrid powertrain, but they didn't want to spend the money to develop their own PHEV powertrain. So they decided to walk across the corporate office to their partners, Mitsubishi. So yes, while this is an Outlander underneath, it actually feels more Nissan than it does Mitsubishi. Let me explain. Starting with the exterior looks, yes, it is essentially an Outlander with the Mitsubishi badges removed and replaced by Nissan badges. It feels a bit weird because I'm so used to seeing the Outlander with Mitsubishi badges because that car has been out for I don't know how many years now. But overall, I think that it's a pretty good looking SUV. It's on the inside where it feels more Nissan than it does Mitsubishi. Firstly, this Nissan Rogue PHEV doesn't receive the updates that the Mitsubishi Outlander received last year. So that means it still has the smaller infotainment screen that runs the older infotainment system. And if you look closely, it's a system that Nissan has been using for the last decade or so. Only more recently did they move to a new Google-based system. Then there's the gear selector, which came from the Nissan Rogue, which came out 1 year before the current generation Outlander did. It's the same story with the steering wheel buttons and the climate control buttons. They're all physical, which is awesome, but they're also very reminiscent of the Nissan Rogue. Even the font used in the driver display is a Nissan font. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. It's great, and the interior controls are simple to use. I'm simply pointing out that the interior very much feels like a Nissan product, even in the Outlander version. It feels much more Nissan on the inside than it does Mitsubishi. My only minor complaint is that it would have been nice if the Rogue PHEV received the same infotainment system that the updated Outlander received last year. But at least the Rogue PHEV comes with wireless CarPlay, but unfortunately for us Android users, it's wired Android Auto. As for the second row, it's not too bad sitting behind my tall 6'4" driving position. If you're more average height, say 6 feet, sitting behind someone that's also 6 feet, then you'll have a little bit more space. These second row seats do slide forwards and backwards, and they do recline as well, so there is quite a bit of versatility in the second row. The third row though is only there if you find yourself in a pinch and need to carry your kids' friends. If you plan on using the third row often, then might I suggest getting something bigger so that whoever sits back there won't hate you for the rest of their lives. As for the trunk, there's 308 liters behind the third row, which is not much. But fold them down and the cargo capacity increases to a much more usable 866 liters. Fold down the second row and cargo space increases to 1,822 liters. On the tech front, the Rogue PHEV is only available in the Platinum trim here in Canada for the time being. As a result, it's a fully loaded vehicle with quilted leather upholstery, heated front and second row seats along with a heated steering wheel, a 3-zone automatic climate control system, a panoramic sunroof, a head-up display, a wireless phone charging pad, a power liftgate, a Bose 9-speaker audio system, and even rear door sunshades, or peasant blockers as some like to call them. As for the price, this one is actually a little bit less expensive than the equivalent Outlander PHEV, $875 less expensive. This one will cost you $58,698 Canadian. However, the Outlander PHEV does get a few more extras like the bigger touchscreen, the newer infotainment system, and optional massaging front seats. This one doesn't have any of that. So on the outside, it's still a Mitsubishi, but on the inside, it's very much a Nissan. What about under the hood? Well, this Nissan Rogue PHEV uses the same Outlander powertrain. At the heart of it is the Mitsubishi 4B12 engine, which is a 2.4-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder. Aided by a couple of electric motors, total system output is 248 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque. Put your foot on the throttle, and this thing really goes. It doesn't give you that neck-snapping acceleration that you would feel in an EV, but it really hustles, especially when you take into consideration that this car weighs 2.1 tons, about the same as an EV. Being a plug-in hybrid, you can keep the engine off and run purely on electrons. In EV mode, it's rated to return up to 61 kilometers of range. But of course, all that depends on your driving style, ambient temperature, climate control usage, and so on. So you may get more or perhaps less than what it's rated for. Charging up that battery, however, is not as easy as it is in the Outlander. That car can be charged at a DC charging station. This Rogue PHEV cannot. Worse yet, it can only accept up to 3.5 kilowatts of power from a level 2 charger. That means a flat battery to 100% will take almost 8 hours. You could tell the car to recharge the battery by setting it into the charge mode. However, that is going to use up a bit more fuel. On highways, it's only a little bit because the engine is already running, but in a city, the engine never shuts off, so it will use up a lot more fuel. It's not a very efficient way of recharging the battery. Some energy can be recuperated through regenerative braking. Additionally, the Rogue PHEV has a semi-one-pedal mode called E-Step. This mode slows down the car gradually and quickly when lifting your foot off the throttle pedal. But for the last 10 kilometers an hour or 6 miles an hour, the brake pedal is still required. So it's not a true one-pedal drive mode that you'd find on an EV. However, in this mode, the brake pedal will move on its own, so it will not be where you expect it to be if you need to apply more braking force. What if you want to save the battery charge for later use? Well, the Save drive mode does just that. The Rogue PHEV in this mode behaves more like a traditional self-charging hybrid. However, this crossover is not as efficient with the gasoline as a dedicated self-charging hybrid. It's rated for 9.4 liters per 100 kilometers in a city and 8.7 liters per 100 kilometers on a highway. Those are more gasoline-only fuel consumption numbers rather than hybrid numbers. But if you continuously plug it in and use it as it was designed to, then you can go for weeks without ever visiting a gas station for a refill. On the move, the Nissan Rogue PHEV is a sensible crossover. It feels heavy and wide from behind the steering wheel, but not cumbersome to maneuver. The steering is a tad lighter than the Outlander version and quite vague in feel, but at least it makes it easy to park and it does have surround view cameras. Where this car really shines is over long distances. The ride is great and compliant over bumps and poorly maintained roads. It's not the most plush ride, but coupled with those front seats, you do not feel tired even after an hour-long commute to or from work. As for cabin noises on highways, the Rogue PHEV is about as quiet as the Hyundai Palisade or Kia EV5. In other words, really quiet. But at speeds below 30 kilometers an hour or so, you will hear the mandatory EV pedestrian hum that all hybrids and EVs are mandated to have. Additionally, when the engine is running, it produces a high-pitched tone, almost like a dentist's drill. But turn on the radio and the music will drown out that noise, for the most part. In the end, Nissan finally has a plug-in hybrid in the market. The bad news is that the Mitsubishi version is the better option. Not only are there more trims to choose from at lower prices, but that car gets more updates that this one doesn't have. I guess the real winner in all of this is Nissan themselves, because as I said, they finally have a plug-in hybrid to compete against other plug-in hybrids, but also there are twice as many Nissan dealerships across Canada as there are Mitsubishi dealerships. So I would assume that it's easier for consumers to get their hands on one of these than it is the Mitsubishi version, and also get it serviced at a Nissan dealership. Overall, I think it's a great car. It just would have been nice if this one also got the same updates as the Outlander and also was offered in more trims at lower prices. But in the meantime, if you would like to know more about this 2026 Nissan Rogue PHEV, I have a more detailed written review of it over on my website. You can find that link in the video description or click on the pop-up banner right up there. And as always, I will see you in the next car, truck, or most likely another SUV. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and see you in the next one.